Hi, and welcome to the first screencast in a series about developing with the Symfony2 framework. Over the next couple weeks, I'm going to walk you through the step-by-step process of setting up and developing your own web application using Symfony2. I'm going to make a couple assumptions along the way. I'm going to assume that you're familiar with PHP as a programming language. I'm going to assume that you're familiar with the concept of MVC or Model View Controller, and I'm going to assume that you're a little bit comfortable with command line. I'm using Ubuntu 11.10. But if you're using a different system, you should be able to follow along pretty closely with maybe a few minor modifications. Um, Symfony 2, if you're not familiar with it, is a full stack web framework built in the PHP 5.3 PHP version 5.3. It leverages a lot of the newest features of the PHP language, and it's a really great framework. I use it at work, I use it personally, I use it everywhere. There's a couple ways to download it. One is from Symfony.com on their downloads page. And this is something that probably a lot of people that have played around with the framework are familiar with. It's the Symfony Standard Edition. It's kind of a sandbox to let you get started quickly, and you can download it with vendors here. We're actually not going to do that right now. Sorry if you've clicked the link. We're going to download it from their Git repository because we want the latest and greatest, and we want to be able to leverage the full power of using version control. Git, by the way, if you don't have it, you can download it from git-scm.org, and you'll need that to follow along with the screencast over the next couple of weeks. Here on their Git repository page, I'm going to just copy. I am going to copy their clone link. I'm going to come to my command line. I'm going to type git clone, the link that we just copied, and then the name of the project. I'm calling this one Symfony 2 tutorial. You can call it whatever you want. Depending on your connection speed, it could take a few minutes. Probably not. Once it's done, we're going to change directories into that directory, and we're going to take a look around. You can see that we've gotten kind of a default structure. But the most important thing that we want to look at right now is this composer.json file. Composer is the dependency manager that Symfony 2 uses, and it's how we'll get all the things that the framework needs to run. Composer, by the way, is hosted at getcomposer.org. We're going to want to go there and go to the download page, and it gives you a script that you can run. If you're not comfortable with this, and I know a lot of people wouldn't be from downloading or running a script off the internet, you can look at how it works, but I'm going to go ahead and run it. What it's doing is making sure that my system can run Composer and then downloading it. This could take a while, depending on your connection speed again. So I'm going to copy from another location. I'm going to copy everything from another location's vendors directory that I've already gotten, so that you don't have to wait around for me to do that. And then once you've done that, you can run php composer.var install. This will go through the process of downloading all the vendors. Like I said, it can take a while, so I'm going to skip that process, but there are a few things that it does to set up afterwards that I need. So while it's doing that, I'm going to jump over to NetBeans, which is what I use to develop. I'm going to create a new project. You can follow along using Eclipse or Gedit or whatever you use to develop, but I'm going to create a new project for the directory that we just created. I want to make sure that it's a 5.3 project because, like I said, Symfony uses PHP version 5.3, and if you don't set it to that, then NetBeans won't recognize some of the language constructs that it uses, like namespaces and closures, to name a few. And now that that's ready, I can take a look here. And I want to just go through. We have the app, bin, src, vendor, and web directories. Web is where all the static files live. That's where you'll see files like JavaScript or images or CSS. It's where also the front-end controllers that the users will hit on every request live. Right now you can see app.php and app.dev.php. The vendor directory is where all the dependencies of the framework and of your project live. That's third-party software. The src directory is where the code of your project specifically lives. You can see that it comes with some default stuff, an Acme demo bundle. That's just a quick overview that hopefully will get running by the end of the night here. The bin directory is where you'll put stuff that's made up for your project, like deploy scripts or update scripts or things that don't really belong anywhere else. And then the app directory is probably the most important configuration directory. It's home of the kernel, which is loaded on every single request. And really, the secret behind Symfony 2 is that it's really loosely coupled. Nothing depends on each other as little as possible. And you can see that it's really just a collection of bundles that are being loaded on every request. We have down here some bundles that are only loaded. You can see it's loaded for the dev and the test environments, and one of those is the Acme demo bundle that we'll be using tonight. The resources is for global views and global stuff like that. Cache and logs are where one of the greatest features behind Symfony is the fact that it caches its requests. You can see that it's building out. So next time it runs, it doesn't have to load 50 files or 100 files or whatever. It loads 5. It's really great. It improves a lot. It improves speed a lot. Then there's the config directory. You can see all the config files that are here. One of the most important that you'll be using frequently is the parameters.yaml. It includes things like database connection information, the mailer that you're using if you're using one, and a secret key that's used for cookies and forms and things like that. We'll change this later, but for now that's fine. One of the things that I actually want to do is a best practice. It's not required, but it's probably a good idea. I'm going to go to my command line, and I'm going to copy the app config parameters YAML file that we just looked at, and I'm going to copy it to app config parameter.yaml.dist. That makes a distribution file that I can send around with some sensible defaults. It's, like I said, it's not required, but if you don't do what I'm showing you now, if you're uploading this to a repository, then anyone that has access to the repository is going to know what your connection information is. If your repository is public, that's a bad thing. So now I want to edit my git ignore file to tell Git that it does, to pretend that my parameters.yaml doesn't even exist. I use Vim for command line editing. You can use whatever you'd like, but I'm just going to come in here. You can see that there are a few that Symfony has automatically added. I'm going to add app config parameters.yaml. So that way, no matter what happens, no one will see the database connection information unless I put it somewhere that's not in this file. And that way, not only is it a little more secure that way, but when I deploy to a server, it's probably going to have different information than my testing server or my development server. And so it's a good way to not have to worry about conflicts and keeping track of different versions of the same file in the version control system. Now that we've done that, we should be ready to jump over to our browser and take a look. We're getting this white screen for a reason, and that's that we need to be hitting the app dev PHP, because if you remember that over here in the app kernel, the demo bundle is only being loaded for your dev environment, and if you hit by default, it's not going to load your dev environment. So you want to hit whatever your base URL is. Mine is localhost/symfony2-tutorial/app_dev.php. You're going to see an error here that says failed to write cache file. What that means is that you downloaded everything as whatever your user you're on the command line as. For me, it's problematic. For you, it's whoever you run as. And then your web server is most likely running as a different user. For Ubuntu, it's www-data. There's a way to fix this that's pretty well documented. I'm going to go back to the Symfony website, go to their documentation, wait for it to load. And then the book. The book is great. The book covers a lot of the basics. In the early days of Symfony, there wasn't a lot of documentation, but the community has done just a great job at putting the documentation together. We want to look at installing and configuring Symfony, and we want to scroll down to the section about configuration and setup, and then setting up permissions. There's a couple different options you can try. I'm only going to walk through the one that works for me, and that is using the ACL system. I've already done everything else that it says here. You have to enable ACL support, but I can go to my command line and I can run the command that it gives me. I can do sudo setupacl -r, and then what you're doing here is making it so that your user and the web user can both read, write, and execute your app cache and app logs directory. There's two commands that you have to run. They're both really similar. One has a -r and one has a -dr. Once we've run that, we should be able to come back over here and we see a welcome screen. Congratulations, you just set up your very first Symfony application. You can play around with it a little bit. There's a tour, here's a demo. It shows you the code, and this is a controller and template code. It's very, very simple. In the coming weeks, we'll be delving in more deeply and making it a little more personalized for us. I encourage you right now to run this configure step to connect it to an existing database. You can use a couple different, maybe SQLite if you'd like, or MySQL. It'll also create a hash for you. But congratulations, that was really simple. If you've done everything like I showed you, you should now have a working base install of Symfony 2. I'll see you next week.